So I'm going to keep reading here from Tim Egg's commentary here. Faith, speaking of Romans 10, apart from faith, the Torah functions only to condemn. It can never bring life or covenant membership. In fact, genuine obedience to Torah, obedience which includes the correct motive as well as right actions, flows from faith. Thus, the influencers had the sequence backwards. Torah does not produce faith, rather faith produces obedience to Torah. We've said this 100,000 times, it feels like, to 100,000 different people, it feels like. We do not keep Torah to try and earn salvation here. We keep Torah because we are saved. It's a very, very big difference. And we've had this quoted at us a bunch of times, well, the Torah is not of faith. And I mean, really think about that for a moment. I've made a TikTok on this before. I'm going to say it again. Really think about that statement. The Torah is not of faith. Who else would keep Torah? Except for somebody who believes and has faith in God. Like, what? Atheists aren't keeping Torah. And they're usually using it in some way to say, well, you don't actually have any faith if you keep Torah. No, what? That makes no sense.
It comes from this. It comes from the cognitive dissonance, right? This idea that faith has to stand alone, otherwise it's not actual faith, right? It has to be simple intellectual assent. You think the right things, right? And if there's anything else that is included in the think the right things category, then you don't actually think the right things, right? And the problem with that is that James also addresses that in James 2, right?
Yeah, do you want to pull up James 2 and read it? You like talking about it.
Yeah, James 2. This is so really it starts in verse 14. James 2:14 says, "What good is it, my brothers, if someone says he has faith but does not have works?" Right? So what good is it? Like what is it worth if he says he has faith but no works? Can his faith save him? So he's asking the question, and this is what I love, is that most Christians today would probably answer this question with, yes, absolutely. The problem is James is asking the question with the implication that the answer to this question is no, right?
Yeah.
So he goes on and says, if a brother or sister is without clothes and lacks daily food, and one of you says to them, go in peace, keep warm, and eat well, but you don't give them what the body needs, what good is it? In the same way, faith, if it does not have works, is dead by itself. But if someone will say, you have faith and I have works, show me your faith without works, and I will show you my faith by my works. You believe that God is one, you do well. The demons also believe and they shudder. In other words, this is where you get into the idea of belief, right? Thinking the right things. And he says the demons think the right things too. Like they understand fully well. But this is where he really attacks the idea of standalone faith, right? Foolish man, are you willing to learn that faith without works is useless? Wasn't Abraham our father justified by works when he offered Isaac his son on the altar? You see that faith was active together with his works, and by works faith was perfected. So the scripture was fulfilled that says Abraham believed God, and it was credited to him for righteousness. Now, that word believed, well, before I finish, I want to get to that because Jordan Peterson talks a lot about that. Right? When people ask him, do you believe in God? And his answer is, I behave as though God exists. Because that is what belief is, right? Jordan Peterson very specifically attacks this idea that belief is something that is purely intellectual, something that doesn't require actual action or modification of behavior, right? To him, that is not what the word believe means. The word believe necessitates action behind it. And he's correct. His philosophy is perfectly in line with what James is saying here. So James continues and says, "You see that a man is justified by works and not by faith alone." Now, for all of my Paul fans out there, understand this is literally the only point in the entire New Testament where the words "by faith alone" exist. Right? We add this word alone, right? By faith alone, we add that to Paul's words, but that is not written in the text. The only place it's written in the text is right here where faith is saying by faith alone. That's not the right way.
Where James is saying that. And so, yeah, it's interesting that the only time that that phrase ever appears in the Bible is it's in a negative connotation.